Do you want to find out what's inside the pages of Escape from Undergarden? Then this is the video for you. Hi, my name's JVC Parry. I'm a freelance writer in the tabletop gaming industry. I've worked for companies like Lawsmith, Nord Games, Ghostfire Gaming and Jetpack 7 to write some adventures that you might know and love. And I also publish my own work through Kickstarter or previously through DM's Guild, where you'll know me for projects such as Call from the Deep. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about what's inside Escape from Undergarden, which is my newest published adventure, which is currently funding through Kickstarter as of February 2023. Escape from Undergarden is a Tier 2 5th edition adventure that should take characters from 5th to 8th level and is over 50 pages long, packed with full colour artwork and maps. I actually wrote Escape from Undergarden about 5 years ago for a company called Goblinstone. Well, Goblinstone are no longer around, and eventually, after many years of pestering, I managed to buy back the rights to this adventure, which already had some amazing artwork and cartography to go along with it. So last year I acquired the rights, and this year I've managed to publish through Kickstarter this adventure. So, what is Escape from Undergarden? Escape from Undergarden is a Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition adventure written by myself, JVC Parry, and Benoit de Bernardi of Goblinstone. The adventure is set in a relatively generic fantasy setting. It's not tied to a specific location like the Forgotten Realms, for example, which means that you should be able to drop it into any ongoing campaign. However, the adventure is also self-contained, so it could just be run on its own as a short arc if you wish. The central plot of the adventure is that a huntress named Mirren Gallant has gone missing during an annual trip to the village of Thurl. When the characters arrive in the village, they realise that the place is overrun by noble hunters who are searching for a mythical beast known as the Golden Heart, a stag with antlers made of pure gold. Well, as the characters investigate around the village of Thurl, they learn that Mirren has trespassed on a sacred site of a group of fanatical druids called the Deep Root Ring. As they follow this lead, they find themselves at the druids' hideout and eventually in the fantastical Fey prison of Undergarden, where the druids throw transgressors. It's here that the characters can find Mirren Gallant, but the real quest is in whether their characters can actually escape from Undergarden. This next section of the video is going to go into the plot and the specific chapters of Escape from Undergarden in more detail, so if you're looking to avoid any spoilers, now's the time to turn the video off. So, the adventure begins with the introduction, where we are introduced to Keyleth Gallant, a nun who is looking for her missing sister Mirren. It also talks a little bit about Thurl, the last known location of Mirren Gallant, and the surrounding Redbark Wood, which is populated by the Deep Root Ring druids. We also get an introduction here to the overall structure of the adventure and to the milestone leveling system, which helps the characters progress at narratively satisfying points during the adventure. Chapter 1 follows on from this introductory plot hook and actually gives you some role-playing information for the character's first meeting with Keyleth Gallant. It then goes on to describe the town of Thurl in more detail, where the characters can start to pick up clues about what happened to Mirren. Well, there are numerous locations that the characters can get involved with, including the Golden Heart Inn, which is capitalising on the rumours of this Golden Heart beast that the nobles are here to hunt. But there are also other characters such as the Fletcher, who the characters might choose to interact with and slowly get more of a feeling for what happened to Mirren. Eventually, they discover that Mirren was last seen setting off for the Glistening Waterfall, which is one of the sacred sites of the Deep Root Ring druids. Of course, these druids are not happy about people wandering willy-nilly into their sacred areas, and we find out that that's probably what happened to Mirren. The town of Thurl comes with its own full-colour map, which has keyed locations such as a herbalist's hut, a lumber yard, and a hunter's shrine. Before the characters decide to progress on to Chapter 2 of the adventure, where they seek out the Glistening Waterfall, they might choose to engage in an optional side quest called the Fool's Golden Heart. During this side quest, they uncover the plot of an ambitious noble to become well known throughout the realms. In Chapter 2 of the adventure, The Deep Root Ring, the characters head out into the red bark woods which surround Therail. They might be heading directly to the glistening waterfall if they've already got enough leads. They might be simply searching for the druids or aimlessly wandering in a search for Mirren Gallant. Either way, they should eventually come into contact with the druids or with one of their sacred sites and discover that these druids are no longer just driving hunters out of the forest, but they're actually capturing them and taking them back to their hideout. It's at this hideout that the chapter culminates, where the characters find the entrance to Undergarden, where Mirren has been thrown. Although Chapter 2 is laid out as if the characters go and storm the druid's hideout in a kind of classical D&D way, there's actually a lot of information given here about role-playing the druids, and especially the druidic leader, Eric Blackthorn. I included this information because I wanted to make it clear that combat wasn't the only way to solve this particular challenge, and in fact, the characters can roleplay their way through a lot of the content in this adventure without ever drawing their swords. Now, Chapter 3 starts when the characters actually enter Undergarden on their search for Mirren Gallant. This is where the bulk of the adventure takes place, and it's also the bulk of the content in this book. It covers Undergarden and its sub-locations, which include fairy rings, standing stones, the cave of Beric the Bear King, and the grove of the evergreen oak. After a relatively short search, the characters should find Mirren's recent camp and track her back to a spider's nest where she is currently strung up for dinner. Hopefully, the characters manage to save Mirren Gallant in time before the phase spiders devour her. Of course, finding Mirren isn't the sole aim of the adventure. They also have to get her out of Undergarden as well as themselves. Now, this might seem easier than it is because once they reach the stairs that they entered through, they realise they go on forever in a kind of strange fey illusion. Instead, the characters have to collect 4 keys, one for each season, and use them in Undergarden's enchanted sundial. Canny players might also notice that the sundial can be turned, which changes the season of the Forest of Undergarden. Through this mechanism, they can make certain challenges in Undergarden easier or harder for themselves, depending on whether they've got the smarts to work it out. While the characters travel through Undergarden in search of these keys, they come across random encounters which are keyed to each season, and also to the presence of Fendragol, the green dragon. While the dragon is alive, Undergarden is a much more dangerous place to be. And of course, each season presents its own challenges. Each key can be found within its own unique location, which presents an unusual challenge to the characters. For example, the summer key is found outside a frozen cave around the neck of the skeletal remains of Remoraz prey. Well, during any season except summer, the Remoraz is also outside the cave, where it's cold, writhing around in the remains of its past meals. However, if the characters have thought ahead and turned the sundial to the summer direction, they'll find that the Remoraz has retreated away from the heat into its frozen cave, leaving the key exposed for them to take. Each key also has its own fantastic illustration, and on the pages where its location can be found, we've created a custom border to help the DM more easily find the keys throughout the adventure. Hopefully, the characters manage to find all 4 keys before they succumb to the enchantment of Undergarden, which slowly turns them into plants. If they do so, they'll be able to escape without much trouble. However, there are other parts of Undergarden that might interest them or engage them as they explore. For example, as I previously mentioned, Fendragol the Green Dragon has a lot to offer the players, as does the hag Auntie Stitchtooth, who's lurking around in the dark, shadowy areas of the forest. At the end of this chapter, the characters might come into conflict once more with the Deep Root Ring druids, as they don't want to see Mirren leave Undergarden, or the characters for that matter. Depending on what's gone before in the adventure, whether they fought their way in or used roleplay to access Undergarden, you'll have to adjust the finale based on that information. There's also a stretch goal of the Kickstarter campaign to include extra digital content. Part of this will be a final boss fight in Undergarden that the characters have to face off against should they try to leave. The characters' escape from Undergarden marks the end of their adventure, though there is a brief section towards the end of the book about concluding the various plot threads that have become important to the characters during their quest. The book finishes with a few appendices which contain player handouts, new stat blocks for monsters and NPCs in the adventure, such as Beric the Bear King and Eric Blackthorn, as well as a list of rare magical mushrooms that the characters can find in Undergarden that might make their quest a little bit easier. There's also the Fool's Golden Heart, the optional side quest which I mentioned earlier that the characters can engage with. So, that's a brief overview of what's inside Escape from Undergarden. I hope you'll consider backing the project and subscribing to the channel. See you soon.